The sport of dogs as we know it is the modern version of one of the world's oldest. There have been dogs as long as there have been people, and since the beginning of history, carefully kept records show the constant effort of civilized man to improve the breeds of the animal which served him so well and faithfully. Today, most of us don't depend on our dogs for our livelihood, but the characteristics that were bred in through hundreds of generations of services are still important to us. Pure breeding is a quality, and for us, the standard of a breed has become a measure of perfection and a matter of pride. For us, ownership of a purebred dog means pleasure and satisfaction, participation in one of the oldest and cleanest of all the organized sports. As American as baseball, it is a good deal older. Rich in tradition, characterized by spirited competition and fair play, the sport of dogs has its own code, a code that grew up to bring out the best in both men and animals. From that code came the rules and policies of today. Set down by the American Kennel Club, they are administered by the club to provide the greatest possible services for the sport and for you and your dog. The American Kennel Club was formed almost 3/4 of a century ago by a small group of dog fanciers. It was a service organization designed to meet the needs of their sport. It is still a service organization, non-profit, supported entirely by the people who use its services. In 1884, the club was a one-man, one-room office. Today, at 221 4th Avenue in New York, it takes up more than 25,000 square feet, and more than 200 people fulfill the functions required for complete service to you and your dog. Members of the AKC are clubs, not individuals. The services of the Kennel Club are available to anyone who wants to use them, and they are the same regardless of any affiliation. The Kennel Club was formed to meet a need, and as the interest in purebred dogs grew through 3/4 of a century, the need increased. It was a need for service, to groups, to clubs, to individuals, to anyone who was interested in purebred dogs. AKC has grown up by providing those services. One of the services is the club's official magazine. Originally designed for breeders, it is now a monthly magazine for all dog owners. The oldest publication of its kind, it contains articles about dogs as well as all AKC notices and reports. Another service is the Studbook Register, also an official publication. Published periodically, it contains pedigree data on all registered dogs that have been used for breeding. Some bloodlines can be traced back to before 1885. The library is a service too. Books about dogs in almost every language make up one of the most complete collections of its kind in the world. It's an educational service, and yearly inquiries running into the thousands show the interest in the sport and the public's appreciation of this service. Shows and sanctioned matches require service. Member shows, license shows, field trials, obedience trials. 2,500 events per year mean an average of 50 per weekend, all involving checking of dates, clubs, committees, judges, eligibility, premium lists, and a dozen other details essential to the service of an organized sporting event. By far the biggest and most important service is the Kennel Club Studbook. Started before the club itself, these records go back to 1876. When the Kennel Club took them over in 1885, there were 2,000 registrations representing 10 breeds. Today, there are more than 3.5 million registrations representing 111 breeds. Applications are coming in at the rate of 40,000 per month. All AKC services are available to anyone who wants to use them. and who wants to follow the sport of dogs according to American Kennel Club rules. Like the services, these rules were developed to meet the needs of the sport, and each of them came about through a unique democratic process provided for in the club's constitution. These are the men who make AKC rules, the delegates to the quarterly meetings. Each delegate represents one of the more than 300 member clubs. They are sportsmen, limited by the Constitution to a purely sporting interest in dogs. As the legislative body of the AKC, they make the club rules. Their functions also include electing member clubs, approving delegates, and electing a board of directors to see that the rules are carried out. The board meets monthly. It is responsible for management of all club activities and for all matters of policy and discipline. These men, too, are sportsmen, limited to a purely sporting interest in dogs. They cannot make rules or change them. Their job is to carry on where the delegates left off. They interpret the rules, establish policies, and select the administrators whose full-time job is to run the club and provide for the smooth continuation of all its services according to the rules and policies. Their jobs are to administer the services. They cannot make or change rules or policies, nor do they have the power to grant exceptions. They represent the Kennel Club to the public, and they are responsible for the club's fulfillment of its service obligations. A large part of their work is in relation to the routine matters that make the sport such a pleasant one. But problems do arise, and altogether a great deal of time must be devoted to solving them, and a lot more time to answering complaints from people who do not understand rules or policies and the reasons behind them.
American Kennel Club, 221 4th Avenue, New York City. Gentlemen, I was never so outraged in my life. Judge Farnham put my shepherd down and gave first to a bitch that wasn't even half as good. This is the first time in 5 years that my bitch hasn't won her class. And either your man Farnham doesn't know his business, or he just isn't on the level. I've heard things about him before, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're true. Or maybe that's the way you run things. I don't know, but everybody I talked to said I was right. And I absolutely demand that you do something, because if you don't,
American Kennel Club, 221 4th Avenue, New York City. Dear Sirs, when I read your letter to the club telling us that we couldn't have Jameson to judge at our show, they hit the ceiling. This is an important show, and we always have Mr. Jameson. We're going to have him again if we have to petition the chairman of your board of directors. Or does that violate one of your rules, too? The club voted unanimously to start by writing to you, and then we'll go as far as we have to. It would seem sensible that since you approved our date...
The American Kennel Club, 221 4th Avenue, New York City. Gentlemen, you people certainly make life difficult. When my daughter decided to show her dog, we filled out your complicated registration application and sent it in. There was plenty of time before the show, and now, when it's almost too late, she gets your letter rejecting the application because of a technicality. I explained to you that we have had the dog for a year, and the people who sold it to us moved away. Now, how can we get their signatures? The least you could do under...
There are complaints, but they average less than 1% of the mail that pours into the mailroom at 221. Between 3,000 and 5,000 letters a day. The club is a service organization for a national sport, and for the payment of nominal fees, each of its services is available to anyone with a 3-cent stamp. Kennel Club procedures, like its services and its rules and policies, have grown up to meet the needs of the sport. They mean processing more than 2 million pieces of mail a year, not just handling them, but acting on them individually, efficiently, and with a maximum of accuracy. Every one of those thousands of pieces of daily mail requires some kind of action. There are forms, some 300 of them, applications for litter registrations, individual registrations, dog show licenses, sanctioned show matches, obedience trials, kennel names, handlers' licenses, and so on. These are forwarded to the proper departments for processing. Then there are reports of AKC events, judges' books, catalogs, entry forms. These too must be forwarded for checking, recording, and filing. Letters can number anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 a day. Requests for help or information or clarification of rules, routine administrative correspondence, and complaints. Whatever they are, letters are read and routed to the person best qualified to handle them. Mail may come in by the thousands, but each item is a matter of individual service, and behind each one is a small but complete Kennel Club story. Knowing those stories is an important part of the background of every correspondent at 221, especially when it comes to complaints. Let's take that first one. Approval of judges is one of the club's services. Competition makes the sport. It depends upon honest, intelligent judges. The present system of approving judges is not perfect, and constant effort is being made to improve it. A judge's career starts with a 6-page application that goes deeply into his background in dogs and his experience with the breed he wants to judge. A detailed questionnaire asks questions that can be answered only by a man who knows the club rules and ring procedures. There are questions like this. You are judging a class of 2 dogs, entries number 8 and number 10. You have determined that number 8 is the better specimen, and you are about to mark your book when the exhibitor of number 10 approaches you, saying that she wishes to protest entry number 8 for a disqualifying fault. What would you do? When his application and questionnaire were returned to the club, members of a committee reviewed them and wrote individual opinions. The committee's opinions were favorable, so notice of his application was published in the Gazette. Any comments that were received were included with his papers when they were presented at the Board of Directors meeting. After due consideration, the board approved, and he was permitted to serve as an apprentice judge. He worked in the ring under 3 different judges. Then, after each show, he submitted a report on his activities. These reports also went into his file. The entire file was considered by the board once more. If they approved the application, he would be qualified as a judge. However, after each of his first 3 shows, he must still submit a report giving the reasons for his top placings. These too became a part of his file. The file is permanent, and as it builds up over the years, it provides a record for judging the judge. All the data is there, including any previous complaints. Judging dogs according to standards will always be a matter of individual opinion. It is part of the club's service to see that those opinions are as intelligent and as honest as possible. The club does its best to know its judges. When competition is stiff, tempers are likely to run high. Naturally, the lady was disappointed, but the chances are that if she knew the story behind the approval of a judge, her letter might have been more helpful. In any event, she is entitled to a courteous reply. The second complaint involves service to show-giving clubs. As far as the club is concerned, the service starts many months before a show when it sends in a show application with the required fees. The earlier these are received at 221, the better. The first check is on the eligibility of the club. This is important for the protection of exhibitors and their dogs. In order to be eligible, a club must prove that it can conduct a show. Next, the show date. This is important too. No two shows of the same type may be held on the same date within 200 airline miles of each other. This protects both the club and the exhibitors by assuring a fair amount of competition and incidentally better attendance. Date and location are okay. If there had been a conflict, the club would have had to request another date. With everything in order, the date is assigned and the club is notified. At least 8 weeks before the show, the judges' list and the proof of the premium list are sent in. These too are carefully checked. The premium list must contain all necessary information. Prizes must be properly described, and they must be acceptable under Kennel Club rules. On the judges' list, each name is checked against the master file. Under the judge's name, a card shows the breeds he is eligible to judge. Other cards show his assignments. These are posted as soon as the list for a show is approved. According to policy, a judge may not judge the same breeds or groups at 2 shows within 200 miles of each other within a 30-day period. That policy was the basis of the complaint. Mr. Jameson had already been approved for a conflicting assignment. Actually, it was a routine matter, and it was handled in a routine fashion. When the papers were returned, a form letter requesting a change in the judge's list was sent to the club. Mr. Jameson had accepted and been approved for another assignment. There was nothing the AKC could do about it. No one at 221 has the authority to alter policies or rules, but they do make every effort to explain them. The third complaint goes to the very heart of the sport, pure breeding. It's a matter of genealogy, and genealogy is a matter of records. If the records are to be worth anything, they must be absolutely accurate. The Studbook register is accurate because it is compiled from the Studbook, and the Studbook is the product of the AKC registration system, a Kennel Club service in which the margin for error has been reduced to an absolute minimum. Registration is a painstaking, time-consuming, detailed process. It begins with the receipt of a litter application. Every item on the application is important, and everyone must check perfectly. Name and AKC number of sire, sire of sire, dam of sire. Name and AKC number of dam, sire of dam, dam of dam, age of sire, age of dam. Date of mating, date of whelping, signature of owner or owners of sire, signature of owner or owners of dam, age of litter, number of males, number of females. It all takes time, but this is no place for shortcuts. Accuracy counts, and the Kennel Club spends $500,000 a year to get it. If everything is in order, the litter is registered. This number identifies the litter. It will also identify the puppies when individual registrations are applied for. These applications are thoroughly checked too. Names, dates, numbers, signatures. They all must conform to the litter information on file. Checking the dog's name avoids the possibility of future confusion. If the first choice conflicts with the registration, then the second and third are checked in order. If all 3 conflict, the application will have to be returned. Registrations are breeding records. They must be accurate. Signatures are checked too. That's where the complaint originated. The seller's name had been printed in. It wasn't his signature. The letter explaining that he had moved away couldn't help. There wasn't any way for the checker to approve the application. But the Kennel Club could find the seller's last known address and send it along with a suggestion. She could list her dog with the club and show him while the matter is being cleared up. If he wins an award, it will be posted to his credit, and his record card will join the more than 315,000 others in the club files. From these cards, the official show record catalogs are compiled. The histories of dog show competition since 1877. There are other services too, many of them, each of them specifically designed to meet specific needs. There are other problems too, for the people at 221 as well as for the sportsmen who rely on their services. But by and large, Kennel Club procedures for handling more than 3,000 items a day result in a smooth, efficient operation, with more than 200 people working 2 shifts to fulfill the club's service obligations to you and your dog, and to more than 2 million other people and their dogs. Those services help to make dog fancying the kind of sport it is today. The rules and policies help too. But services and rules do not make a sport, and they cannot account for the spirited competition that brings out the best in both men and animals. The sport of dogs as we know it and enjoy it is one of the cleanest and best regulated of all the organized sports. Services and rules help, but they tell only a small part of the story. The biggest part is beyond the rules and beyond the AKC. It is in the feelings that people have for their purebred dogs and in the kind of people who appreciate those feelings. Dog fanciers are sportsmen, and through the years they have characterized their sport by their willing compliance with the spirit of its rules. And as sportsmen, with sincere feeling for their favorite sport, they have taken on themselves the responsibility for perpetuating its finest traditions.